and I'm going to tell you about fertilizing your hibiscus, your container grown hibiscus my way. Okay, you have your way of doing it, and I don't know, I think things have changed since when I first started. So I learned how to do things one way, and I went away for a long time and I came back, and I still remember pretty much everything that I started off doing. So that's how I learned from Barry, and pretty much what I still do today. So I see a lot of people look at and purchase fertilizer from Hidden Valley, and it's really expensive, and it's like really a ripoff, because you could pay almost as much in shipping as you do for the fertilizer itself. And one is just a blend of like 20-20-20 and potassium nitrate, which is like this and this in the proper ratio, which is all by weight, and it just takes a little bit of math and spreadsheet or a calculator, and you can blend up exactly what they use or what they sell. And their wake up spray stuff that's really expensive, potassium nitrate. Okay, so you can save yourself some money, and some things you can do yourself. We have, of course, SpaceCity fertilizer, which you can use, and that kind of negates buying fertilizer from Hidden Valley. But the wake up spray, especially, you can use just potassium nitrate, and it's pretty much it's essentially the same thing. And then I need to work with someone from Lone Star, Eric, about coming up with the gibberellic acid formula to kind of kick it up a little bit, but that has not happened yet. So let's moving along. In our pots, we like to use a good control release fertilizer, and my preference is Osmocote or multi-coat type. It's prilled fertilizer. Use an 18-6-12 8 to 9 month formula, and we apply it at a rate of 1 tablespoon per gallon. And what we do with this, take a dibble, stick it in the pot, make a hole, and then pour the fertilizer in. And then just use like a tablespoon. This is a 2 tablespoon. This is a 2, because I'm going to anybody.
That's a giant tablespoon. That's huge. That's a big tablespoon.
So we use normally a 1. I brought a big one so everyone can see it.
Okay.
So I'm going to anyone that does not have potassium nitrate, I'm going to offer you 2 tablespoons of it to put in a bag and take home. So that's why I brought a 2 tablespoons, but just to take your spoon, put the fertilizer in, and put it in your pot. So I say 1 tablespoon per gallon of pot size. So if you have a 2-gallon pot, you would use 2 tablespoons. A quart, 1 teaspoon. Smaller than that, about a 1/4 teaspoon, and it works pretty well. And then bigger pots, if you use bigger pots, you would use an additional tablespoon per gallon of pot size. And pass this around if anybody wants to see what the Osmocote type fertilizer looks like.
Where do you get that at? Anywhere?
You can get Osmocote at almost any place that sells garden chemical fertilizer stuff. I think even Walmart, you can get it like in a 2-pound can, but it's quite expensive. The bigger the container, the lower the price gets. But so I get mine from Adams Wholesale, and it's about $50, $50-something a bag. So about $1 a pound. And getting Osmocote at Walmart does not cost $1 a pound. And the price, I'll say about $50 a bag. But the prices have been like fluctuating way high. So if I went tomorrow, it might be $70. And then, next week it could be $55. The markets, fertilizer markets are like kind of wonky right now. So,
Probably gonna go from 75 to 100.
well, they keep saying, well, the prices are gonna go back down and stabilize. And I say, well, if they've been charging more for it, and they get used to having that money, they're not gonna wanna give it back.
Not when Russia's the number one producer in the world.
So how often do you do this feeding?
So, with the Osmocote, we use it approximately twice a year. We use an 8 to 9 month formula, which if you live in some place that we can't afford to live, it lasts for about 8 to 9 months. But here, it lasts about 6 months because we have to water because of the heat.
Yeah.
So you put it in February or March, and it's gonna last you about 6 months, approximately. You can tell when it's not working as well, because your plants will get nice and dark green, and the leaves will get nice and big, and then after about 5 months, the color's not so dark green anymore, and it starts getting lighter, and it's about time to start. It's not growing the same, then it's time to do it again. And so let's say August, you do it again. Now that's gonna last you till spring. And we, very simple. Do that. You can do it at half. When you do it the second time, you can do it full rate. I think it doesn't really matter too much. I don't have a picture of the release curve for the fertilizer. I know at one time Marty thought that the Osmocote releases all this stuff at the beginning, and it does not do that. It may have at one point, but anymore it does not. The release curve is pretty good. If you have the 12-month or there's a 90-day, it releases really quick, but those are designed, especially the 90-day. They put that in a pot, and they want those plants to be out of the nursery in 90 days. So it's that nitrogen is in and out quickly. The ones that we use are designed to be more even over that time. It's higher at the beginning, but it stabilizes and gives them pretty even throughout the time. The only thing you can't control is our weather and the heat affects how much of the fertilizer comes out. So if you put it in and our weather is like it is now, none of the fertilizer is getting released. So you also have to keep that in mind too, because it doesn't, I think the ambient temperature, I think it doesn't release if it's below 70.
I have a stupid question. If I'm taking Osmocote and I'm putting a tablespoon in a gallon of water, is that what you said?
No.
You put-
One
what do I put-
tablespoon.
What am I putting in the water? I mean, I'm looking at,
Put it in the soil.
No,
your thing says Osmocote or multi-coat, then it says which is approximately 1 tablespoon / gallon. Gallon
pot.
pot size?
yes,
Oh,
yes.
And then it says use a dribble
A
or make
dibble.
a hole or two
Dibble.
inside the pot.
Dibble.
Use a dibble,
Dibble.
make a hole in the
Oh,
pot,
dibble.
and then you
I
pour the
thought it said dribble and I
No,
was like,
dibble.
you know,
No.
like,
No, make a
something
hole.
that was dribbling water in, I was.
Make a hole, use a
So you're
spoon,
using
pour
it,
the
okay.
fertilizer in the hole.
That I could do.
All right, yes, so the dry stuff goes in the pot.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, so it's 1
Thank you.
tablespoon per gallon, for a gallon pot.
Yes,
Right.
per gallon of pot size. So if you have a 2-gallon pot, you would use 2 tablespoons. On a lower, like a quart, 1 teaspoon, 4-inch, half teaspoon, and
Okay.
quarter for anything less than that. Why are you shaking your head, Joanna?
No, I'm just,
Oh, okay. Okay,
There's a name for that, but I can't remember what it is.
for what? Oh.
Involuntary.
Oh. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So then, because we have such excessive needs for fertilizing our plants because of shows and whatnot, we also use other things. And I like to use an additional granular fertilizer once a month. I use Nelson Nutristar. It's multicolored. It comes in small jars and medium jars, and you can also get it in bags at the wholesale place. And that's the most effective way to get it. And it's like Osmocote. It's much more expensive to get it in the little jars than to get it in the big bag. But this, we also do 1 tablespoon per gallon of pot size once a month. So every 4 weeks, put this in. You just put it on the top.
That's when I started noticing those.
Yes, because
Grass
so here's
He knew what I was talking about.
okay. So I thought you were talking about you put Osmocote, but you use
I use
Nutristar. Okay,
Nutristar.
so here's where we talk about the ambient temperature thing comes in. If you use a granular fertilizer, ambient temperature does not matter. Water activates it, and that's where the magic happens. With your Osmocote type, if it's not 70, the prill does not release anything. You know, it doesn't let the water in, doesn't let the fertilizer get out. So granular, it's what I call hotter because it releases. It doesn't matter if the temperature is high or low, it will release. So we'll pass this one.
That's what I put in those pots
Okay.
when the grass
Yeah,
started popping.
You'll notice, and if you have a manageable number of plants or an unmanageable number of plants, if you can do it on monthly, and so usually when I have an unmanageable number of plants, I start out really good in March, April, May, and then June, and then July, August, and September, not really, because it gets too hot. But if the best way is if just get a plan and start and go fast. Just figure out what you got to do and just start spooning it out. And you know, you can go through and get them done in like 30 minutes. Because if I can go through all of mine, well, if I can go through all of mine in about 45 minutes, then the average person should be able to do them in.
You're talking about putting the whole.
No, with the Nutristar, where
okay.
you just have to just dump it.
Do it on top.
Yeah, and you can go through, if you get in a rhythm, you know, it's like, yours would be a little more difficult, but Amber and Joanna could do it pretty quickly, because you can see the bottom of most of your pots, and
Yes, we
if
can.
you can see them, you can spoon it out pretty quick. Okay. So then,
She bathes in it.
Not my plants, it's me.
so next,
With her hazmat
we do,
suit on.
on a weekly basis, we want to use a good water-soluble fertilizer. And we have SpaceCity. There's also 20, 20, 20, 20, 10, 20, 15, 30, 15, 15, 50, 15, all kinds of different things. Generally, our hibiscus like a lower middle number, but I don't think it necessarily hurts to spray them, foliar spray, with some of the higher middle number. I don't think it hurts anything. I don't think it really hurts if you use a higher middle number in the pot. In a pot is the key. The old hibiscus handbook had, it talked about using a fertilizer with the high middle number, locking up the nutrients in the ground. Well, if you're growing in the pot, it's not in the ground, and it's a little bit different. And
Flushes
I think
it
I had a conversation with Matt Martindale about this, I believe, and is you have in Florida, one side of Florida, the ground is hard, and one side of Florida is sandy. And I don't think that the people in the sandy part didn't have the problems with stuff getting locked up. It was on the west coast where the ground is hard and they'd have the nutrient lockup problem. So they say don't use that higher middle number, but in pots it kind of changes that around. You know, we still need slightly acidic, you know, everything, but the higher middle number does not seem to be an issue for me. And I don't hear people talking about it like they did, 25 years ago. It was a thing. Now it's probably still, I haven't looked at the hibiscus handbook recently, but is it still in there?
Probably.
Okay. So I don't know that it's really an issue the way we grow plants. But if you were growing them in our gumbo, it probably would be a problem long term. Or it might not, who knows? Oh, so back to water soluble. There's plenty of options. You can even mix your own if you care to. It's, like I had said before about the Hidden Valley stuff, you can come up with if you think that SpaceCity is not adequate for your needs at 18/10/28, you can do the math and you can mix and match and you can come up with all kinds of things. This one thing that you can keep in mind is the NPK is percentage by weight. So this and this do not weigh the same thing. So if you think that you take half of this and half of this by volume and mix them together, it does not give you just half of what you combine both the numbers to be, which some people think that's accurate. It takes, well, if you start doing the math, you'll figure out. And if you have problems with it, you can send me an email or text or whatever, and I've got a spreadsheet that, you punch in what you want to do and it will give you the right stuff. We like to use the water soluble as foliar spray. You can do it often or not often, once a week, daily. Since COVID started, I guess more of us have injectors now, and having the injector gives us the ability, if you plumbed it the right way, to be able to spray fertilizer at any time. So I don't have to mix anything up myself. If I want to do a foliar spray, I just get the hose and hook up a nozzle and spray the plants, and that works. So if you're serious about your plants and you have enough plants to think about putting in some kind of automated watering, I highly recommend to get an injector. Or even if you don't, the injector, you can fertilize your stuff whenever you want to. You just mix up a bucket of concentrate, it sucks it out. What would you say, Albert, now that you've got an injector in your greenhouse? If you weren't in a greenhouse, would you still recommend using an injector?
Oh, sure.
Okay, and it's very simple to use. I mean, it's what most of us are using, except for Cindy. She went her own way. But just about everybody else is using one particular brand, and they cost about around $200 for an injector. And
It's a time saver for us.
it is. And
Unbelievable.
because you mix it up, one time, and I mean it all depends on how much I run my water. So I run without a greenhouse with things out in the full sun. I go through more water and fertilizer than the Shimmiks do, but for them, they're only watered like 2 minutes.
1 minute.
One minute a day. 1 minute a day. Their fertilizer lasts a lot longer than my buckets do. But being able to do it and then not have to mess with it for a couple of weeks, and the plants get fertilized all the time. And if I want to do something special, I can mix up a small bucket of something special and put the little thing, pull it out of the regular bucket and put it in the special bucket and suck miners out and spray with miners, or put miners in, have them run a cycle of miners. You can do, the injector makes things really, really easy.
So what brand do you use?
I can't say.
Chemilizer.
Yes, it's a chemilizer.
We use chemilizer.
And
DuPont.
if it's out, if you're outside watering and, you start getting rain, all you have to do is shut it off.
Turn it off, turn it on. They look like, I mean, if we have several days of rain, like during the winter, like now, if we have several days of rain and we don't have any sunshine, ours are in the greenhouse, so they don't need any more water. We just go in there and turn it off, and then when the sun starts shining again, go back in there and turn it on.
Yep. So, I think the most common one that we're using here is chemilizer. DuPont uses dosatron, which is probably the most popular commercially. But chemilizer, I've learned about chemilizer from Don, who's not here today, and they're used primarily for dosing chemicals for livestock. So it's accurate, you know, and it's fixed. Where the dosatron, it is adjustable, and the one that Cindy uses, I think, is adjustable. Is yours adjustable?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can adjust the rate with a dial. With ours injects at 128 to 1, and the other ones, I think the standard is 100 to 1. So, but ours is fixed. So you change the concentrate, and that's determines what you're giving your plants.
I
And
think the hardest thing about ours is and we're still not real good at it, but is figuring out what spitters we need and which pots, and then for what plants. Because not only do the pots need certain spitters, but so do certain plants.
so it's just like with even if you're not using a watering system. So we use the same type of emitters that give the water to the plants, and they all deliver a different gallons per hour. And you can have one, but then not all hibiscus take the same or have the same needs. So you've got one variety that doesn't grow very fast, and it doesn't need very much water, because if you give it 5 gallons per hour, it's gonna drown. So even at only 2 minutes a day or 1 minute a day.
1 minute a day, it's still getting too much
It's
water.
too much water. So, you know, you have to learn your varieties as well. Generally, the fertilizer part works pretty evenly across,
Yes.
but then you still have some varieties that don't grow very fast, and they can use a little boost, a little extra.
And that's when you put that other in.
Kick it up. So sometimes your plants will look a little off, and maybe your leaves are a little bit small.
yes.
Everything looks nice and green, but your leaves are small. So
Green.
that will indicate that you have maybe a minor deficiency. And then so this is old school stem, which is soluble trace elements and minerals. It's made by Scott's Osmocote people, the original Osmocote people. So this is the old powder version of it, and I'll pass this around. This, if you're using it, the rate of dosage for it is 1/4 to 1 whole teaspoon per gallon of water. You mix it up, it does not go into solution very well. So it's best if you mix it up and like pour it out right away. So if you're trying to use that with
Just a stem?
yes, if you're trying to use that with the injector, if you don't have an agitator to keep it stirred up, you have to go back and stir it every so often, because the stuff settles down to the bottom. Or I have stories that I can tell, but we won't go into that. Because you get a good effect from it right away when you put it in, but once it settles, if you come back a couple weeks later, and all that stuff will stay in the bottom of the bucket, and you can really get your money's worth out of that stem. But now they have a water soluble one that comes already mixed, and you just pour it in, and so that's next. But you buy one bag of the powder stuff and it's like lasts a lifetime.
One thing we found is we would wait till, what we do is we keep our old iced tea buckets or gallon jugs. So we line them up in the sun and they get warm.
Mhm.
We put the stuff in there, leave it overnight, keep shaking it every time we walk past it, you know, and then it was good to use then the next day or so. Once it had a chance to, but having that warm water helped.
Definitely. So the other thing that you can do is, I mean, it's not the most cost effective, but you can just take a quarter teaspoon and put it in the pot and then just water it. Just like you do with Epsom salt, which is the other thing. If, you know, a couple times a year is good to use Epsom salt. Does good things to some of the chemicals or some of the minerals in the pot. I don't have much of it, but just regular old MgSO4 Epsom salt like you use in the bath. I'm not gonna pass this around, everybody knows what Epsom salt is. You can
How
get it
much
from
of
Walgreens.
How much you use that to a gallon of water? About,
Normally, I do not mix, usually I do not mix it with water, I put
Put it
I
on.
put like a
one or two
tablespoon.
tablespoons in a pot,
Yeah.
you know, just dry in the pot.
just on top?
Just on top, and then as you water it, it gets,
Okay.
you know, it gets
It
diluted
gets
in there.
dissolved. It's cheaper if you buy it in the person health care part instead of the garden centers. Believe it or not. At least it won't.
Unless you go to Adams and you get it in 50-pound bag.
Yeah, yeah. It's not expensive either way, but
Yes. So, and that's another thing, boy, 50 pounds of that, it lasts a long time.
Forever, yeah.
It'll last a long time. Another good thing, organics like fish emulsion, seaweed, and kelp. During show season, I will add a tablespoon of fish emulsion on a small scale. If I'm mixing up like SpaceCity, like 3 or 4 days before the show, mix up batch SpaceCity and then 1 tablespoon of fish emulsion, which I did not bring any. And those who know about it know why I didn't.
Very good.
So,
Yeah.
you,
every cat in the neighborhood will love it.
exactly.
Right.
So a tablespoon of
So
fish
bad.
emulsion along with your tablespoon of fertilizer in a gallon. And you put that in your pots. About 3 days later, any flowers that you get, you're gonna see some intense colors. So if you had 2 plants of the same variety and you give one the fish emulsion and don't give it to the other one, and they bloom on the same day, you will notice a difference. That makes a dramatic difference in the colors. It's something it does with the minor elements in there. It's pretty remarkable. Okay, then we
They
have,
kinda like that as a, don't do it before a show, but they kinda like that as a foliar feed too.
and I say, well,
Well, you
yes,
get-
absolutely.
You can get your bloom to be bigger and more colorful by foliar spraying that. The thing you have to watch is because of the blue in the, any of your light color plants could pick up that blue when you spray it.
But I was talking about the fish emulsion.
So, but you can also use
Well,
potassium
we
nitrate.
mix it all together.
Yeah.
So you can also use just potassium nitrate, and it does a number on the colors as well. So I generally like to put it in the pot, but you can spray it. And the whole key is, at some point, those buds, it makes a difference, like Marty's saying. And you can spray them up until a certain point, and it will not affect, it will not cause any discoloration or damage
Right.
as far as the show goes. And, you kind of have to, I can't tell you, you can spray it up to 2 days before, it might be 5 days before, and every variety may not be the same. a brown may not have any effect at all, or some
Thicker, heavier textured blooms.
in ones where those buds are really super tight, you know, might not have any problems with it at all. But it's another thing, you can try and just see what happens, but just spraying, even if you don't spray the buds and just spray the foliage, it takes it up and still will affect
Will affect
the
it.
blooms too. So then, last thing, we have the snake oil type things like Super Thrive and Spray and Grow. And if it makes you feel better about how you're growing your plants, go for it.
It's not a strong recommendation.
I'm not
Well,
saying that. I have.
Everything has its use and
That's right.
has its theory.
That's right.
So
Now,
with Super Thrive, if you're getting plants shipped to you and they've gone through hell and back trying to get into Texas in the summer,
Yeah.
put the whole plant in a inside of a container that you can saturate it, drown it, and put Super Thrive in it, and it will perk back up and it'll be fine.
How about that?
What you do is you submerge them in a 5-gallon, in one of those wash tubs.
Yeah,
You just make a mixture, you just
Yeah.
submerge the whole thing, and it goes, whoo!
yeah,
And it stands up.
Really?
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Super Thrive is great for that, and if you're rooting new stuff, Super Thrive is good there too. What's that other stuff we did?
Spray and grow?
Yep.
Read the label on the thing, it's hilarious.
Oh, Super Thrive, yes.
Super Thrive's label, from the 40s, 20s.
Good read.
I'm 45, I think.
Yeah, World's Fair or something,
Okay, so do we have any other questions on fertilizing? Yes.
Yes, I have a question. Can you mix fertilizers and insecticides together and spray at one time?
Yes.
And that doesn't dilute them, or they don't have any kind of
Dave Mitchell
chemical?
always used to tell me, he said, whenever you're spraying insecticides or fungicides, put you some SpaceCity, put something like that in there.
Oh,
too.
well,
Yeah.
the thing
Sean
is,
says that
so
too. It
my,
goes up there.
so what I'm gonna do, yes, so I'm gonna use potassium nitrate because the nitrate nitrogen, because when the nitrate nitrogen hits the leaves, they open up their, well, what, for us, if it was our skin, it would be the pores, and whatever it is on the leaf, causing them to open up and,
Stomatas,
and,
that's what they're called.
and they absorb, and then it allows them to absorb the chemical that you put on them. So, the SpaceCity and most of the other blue fertilizers, they have some nitrate nitrogen, but if you look at the ratio, it's urea and nitrate, and it's more urea, and the urea nitrogen, when it goes in, it has to convert to nitrate nitrogen, and it takes some time. And the nitrate nitrogen, which is where people will say the burn, because if you use too much of it, you'll burn your plants. But it acts right away, so that the plant does not have, so it's not that it reacts, it does anything right away, it's available to the plants right away.
So
versus-
then if say you're doing your 1 tablespoon per gallon of, or whatever you're doing with your chemical, you mix that up as separate gallons and then mix them together in some kind of a sprayer?
Okay, so if
Or-
you're,
Cause I don't wanna dilute either of the,
so I don't usually use a tablespoon per gallon of the fertilizer, use just a teaspoon is enough.
okay, just
Just-
something.
Just so it gives the plant that little bit that it needs to open up, because we're talking about spraying. So you just want enough for the foliage to open up and accept the chemicals. So the one thing do not quote me on this, but I want to say that if you're using the fertilizer, you can put the fertilizer in first and then
Add your
the other things.
insecticide.
So, like, if you also use soap as a sticker, then you don't put the soap in first. There's an order that they go in. I do not have that with me because we're not talking about insects and whatnot, but there's an order that you put, like, I think if you're using Avid goes in first, and so an emulsified concentrate, ECs go in first, and that's where Avid falls in, and you put them in the right order, so you can put 3 or 4 different things, as long as you put the right ones. You have to research what you're doing, but as long as you put the right ones, you can mix them together and spray one time, 3 or 4 different chemicals. And then you do use fertilizer. You don't have to, but almost nobody used to do it a long time ago, and Larry Johnson was the one that told me to do it, way back when. And I think it's commonplace in if you start reading trade stuff, it's very common. I don't know if they do it with marijuana though, and that's kind of, the thing is, so the marijuana growing has really kind of revolutionized hibiscus growing, because there's so many things have become available to us that weren't available before. Because it's all come from, because there's kind of overlap between the way the two things are grown. So we have better ways to propagate hibiscus, and that all comes from marijuana. Marijuana growing, that's all. That's all. So.
I'll stick to my, what is it? What's the name of the plant that everybody thinks is marijuana?
Texas.
Star. Exactly. Well, if you start reading about, start Googling like spider mites and how to take care of spider mites,
Marijuana's gonna come up.
It's gonna be articles or message boards of cannabis growers.
Yes.
Talking about their problems in their grow operation and all this and that, and there's a big difference between killing spider mites on something I'm not planning on smoking. So I really don't care. But they have a different perspective on things.
I want like all natural organic so that they don't ingest it.
But you would think, but it doesn't work, is the thing. So, they have to find the least toxic way to kill the spider mites. Spider mites are bad on marijuana just like they are on
So
hibiscus.
USDA allows a ratio of spider mites per ounce of leaves?
I have no idea. Once it's fully regulated, that probably would be the case. But Danny DuPont is not here to talk to us about that today, because he would be the person. Okay, so do we have any other questions?
No, it's good.
Thank you.
Okay, if anyone would like a sample of potassium nitrate to use, I have some bags and a spoon and your